So I think of myself as being very, very ordinary. In the larger scheme of things, I'm a very ordinary woman, and in many respects, I've lived an ordinary life and I've achieved ordinary things. I don't underrate that. I think that just having an ordinary life is a very big blessing. However, there was also something very hard that happened to me. It's also very common to have very difficult things happen to you, but that doesn't diminish their impact. As a child, I experienced a lot of hardships. My biological father committed suicide. My mother moved us all overseas, and this all happened before the time I was 3. And also, my mum moved out of the house when I was 7.5. She wasn't psychologically responsive, attentive, so my emotional needs are very much and social needs were very much unmet. And because my mum wasn't there and my biological dad was deceased, my mum did have a long-term boyfriend, but he didn't want to be involved. I, was living with siblings until they all grew up and moved out. But something else happened, which my family is unfortunately sort of they are either very in denial about it or just want me to forget about it. They think that if I just don't think about it, it'll be like it doesn't have an impact, but that's not at all the case in my experience. So I was a victim of CSA. Hopefully you can figure out what that means. And that happened from the time I was an infant multiple times up until I hit puberty. And I remembered this because those memories were blocked out. And I first remembered it when I was about 20. And I told people in my family, but no one did anything about it. My sister didn't talk to the person, I think, for a very long time. And then she's kind of done a 180 on that. And I didn't know how to handle it. And also I was part of a sort of, I call it a soft cult. So I spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars doing weekly sessions with the leader of this group. And it was very much a situation that I experienced in my family of, well, she said this and she said that and what she said went, but it was a kind of therapy that was based on the technology of Scientology, and it was very good. It's very good for people who are avoidant, because it's not about human connection. It's not about connecting to someone and healing through relationship. So eventually I figured out that wasn't really working for me, but that's really affected, or it has it mirrors a lot of what is going on with my family in terms of the denial and lack of direct intimacy. So I remembered when I was 20, nothing happened. I was clueless about what to do. About 7 years ago, now I'm 38, about 7 years ago, when I was 30, about 8 years ago, I started working with psychologists. And that was a whole new experience for me. I had worked with psychotherapists before that, which was helpful, and started doing psychology, and then found out that I have post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And then I had my daughter, and I got married, and that relationship with my husband has been, super strengthening, and having my daughter has just, but when I had my daughter, the flashbacks, really intensified, and, it was, and I was having a lot of intrusive thoughts, and all of the, remnants of the PTSD from what happened to me with the CSA, intensified massively. And the work I've been doing with psychologists has been immensely helpful, and having a stable relationship and focusing on building relationships in family that are supportive, not my relatives, but my husband's, and having, leaning on the strong friendships I have with people who genuinely support me, believe me, and show up in the hard times. So I started speaking out more in my family about what happened, and it wasn't received. And I was saying, things need to change. But the more that I pushed for change and support and protection, the more attacked and excluded I became. And to the point where now I have no communication with my relatives whatsoever. And I did want to continue the relationships with my nieces and nephews very, very strongly, but that hasn't been afforded to me. And that's been extremely hard, but it had to happen. That, I cut myself off from my siblings and my mom because I have an acute pain syndrome, and I was ending up in hospital. And the last time it happened was right before I was meant to go to a family wedding, and my family was going to be there, and I was becoming increasingly anxious, and I thought that I really wanted to be able to go to support the person getting married, but I couldn't. I ended up in hospital screaming, "Help me, help me," writhing in pain. I hit my head. I had a sore head for a good couple weeks afterwards. I was injected with pain medication, and I was sent home with a kind of morphine tablet, and I had to basically stay on bed rest for most of 2 weeks to recover. So I have an acute pain syndrome related to my PTSD. And I don't want my daughter or my husband or the people who love and genuinely support me or for me to have to go through that kind of pain. And I do want to have more children, and this has happened so many times since I had my daughter. I had to make the decision to cut myself off from my family, which is really hard, but I am doing a lot better. And sometimes, like today, I feel really sad about it. But I have a really good life. I like myself. I like who I am. I'm kind, caring. I do selfish things. And for sure, I'm a regular, like I said, I think I'm a very regular person. But the point is that if something really horrible happens to you, to ask for help, to seek support, to keep working at it, because things can get better and you can find your way through, and life can be good. Like my life was never entirely destroyed or miserable, and there were a lot of times growing up, where there were happy moments, lots of happy moments, but those bad things that happened were like this horrible big black monster that was always following me around, and I didn't know what it was. So many, it was always there, but it was a massive transformation when I was able to see it and see who it was and what they did, and make sense of why I felt the way that I felt, and recognize what I could do about it. The hardest part in all of it was letting go of the people that I was expecting love from. That's been probably the biggest battle, is expecting people to support me and love me, and fighting with them to try and get them to do it, and they don't, and being able to let that go. Because they're alive, and like normally with your family, you would expect to have a relationship with them until they die or you die, and that's not the case. So that's very difficult. And it's an awful feeling. And obviously losing the relationships with the kids is the worst part for me, because I had every intention of being there for them their whole lives, for my whole life, and I'm breaking promises that I made. But because the promise to take care, to protect myself and my daughter and my children has to take precedence. Yeah. And also my husband, I don't want to be I know it's very difficult for him to see me in pain. Of course, he can manage because he's a grown-up. But, to knowingly put myself in harm's way is not responsible or kind to anyone. I guess that's all I have to say for now.